Hello, 3 times in a week. I feel so fortunate to be getting to talk to y'all so often this week. Today, as you may have seen from the title, we're going to be having a more kind of practical conversation. So, the past two videos we've talked about this week, or the past two ideas we've talked about this week, have been kind of more story based and more thought provoking. But this video, I want to be something that is practical and actionable, and something that, whether you are thinking about getting into health writing or you're like at the first step, like when you're ready to definitely make that move, something that you can apply to that process and to the place where you are right this very moment. And so therefore, what we're going to be talking about today is the first step to choosing a niche as a health content writer. I already know upfront that when I say the word niche, that automatically pushes some folks away. And I can understand that on I can understand that on so many levels, like you don't even know. And the reason is because I used to be hard down Team NoNiche myself. And I was Team NoNiche for quite a while. That was not a quick phase for me. It took me a while to really buy into the concept of choosing a niche. And that the reason for that is because I describe myself and think of myself as a multi-passionate person. And one of the reasons that I got into health content writing to begin with was because I wanted the variety and the flexibility to be able to work on different projects and do different things. And whoa, sorry about that. And I falsely assumed that by choosing a niche that I was taking that variety and that flexibility away, which isn't the case. So in this particular conversation, I want to do two things. I want to try to offer some of my perspective on why choosing a niche is important and simultaneously is not limiting or restricting. And then I also want to take that a step further and let you know some of the things that you need to be thinking about upfront when you begin to brainstorm and start the process of actually choosing a niche. So before we dive too deep into it, if we haven't met yet, my name is Megan Freeland. I'm a public health pharmacist turned health content strategist, and I run the company Stock Rose Creative, which is a health content marketing company. And I also created the Health Professionals to Health Writers program, which helps pharmacists learn how to replace a portion of their full-time pharmacist salary with freelance health content writing. So really great to meet you. If we haven't met before, make sure that you're following my LinkedIn account, because I do these videos. Usually I do them once a week for the next couple of weeks. As you can see, if you've been online the past couple of days, I'm going to be here talking about health writing much more often than that. But feel free to follow the LinkedIn account. And if you prefer YouTube for some reason, you can also head to the Health Writing for Health Professionals YouTube channel, and you'll see all the videos there in a much more organized fashion, because sometimes it can be tough to keep up with all the different videos the way that LinkedIn is set up. Nonetheless, glad you're here. Whether you are watching this live or on the replay, you can always leave a comment, because I'll see it either way. And my DMs are always open as well. So I think it's time to go ahead and dive into the meat of today's conversation. So I think that what would be helpful is for me to share a few truths about niching that I think will help you find some comfort in if you do have resistance or hesitancy about niching. The first thing I think is important to keep in perspective is that whenever you choose a niche, that niche is not forever. It is a starting point. It is a first step in figuring out where you're going to land as a health content writer. It doesn't mean that if you decide your niche is in pediatric oncology content, that means that you have to write pediatric oncology content forever, or even that you have to write all pediatric oncology content in this very moment. We'll dive into that a little bit more later, but I just want to offer that perspective that um, to keep in mind that a niche is not forever. It is just a starting point. It will evolve over time as you do. It will become clearer over time as you become more clear on what type of content you're really interested in writing. The second thing is that there are multiple ways to niche down. So, a niche, especially when we're talking about health content writing, I think there's this idea that the only type of niche or the only way to choose a niche is to choose a therapeutic area. And that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of different ways that you can kind of splice a niche. So, a therapeutic area could be a niche. A patient population or a specific demographic could be a niche, but so could the type of writing that you're doing. So, in my program, well, let's say in Stock Rose, my health content marketing company, for example, we specialize in blog posts and video scripts. We don't do anything else. Did we used to? Yes. But once we settled down more firmly into our niche, we chose a specific lane of blog content and video script content, video copy, if you want to call it that. That specific type of writing is a type of niche because there's also email marketing, there's social media content, there's infographics and other visual graphics, there's audio content. There are lots of other different types of content. So by saying I specialize in blog posts and video scripts, that is a way of niching down. That's kind of one category of niches that I've chosen. The third truth that I want to level set us with is that a niche does not limit or restrict you. It's more about deciding what your position is going to be in the marketplace of all the other health content writers out there, right? What are people going to perceive about your writing services and your skills when they hear your niche? Are you going to fall into like a blanket of just general writers? Or are you going to hold a specific position in the market so that when people think of this particular niche or this particular need, they more readily think of you and your services? So a niche does not necessarily limit or restrict you. There's nobody forcing you to only write about this niche that you say that you write about. It's more about your position in the market, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into what that means and why that's important later in this conversation. But if that makes sense to you, just say yes in the comments, or just say yes, that makes sense, something like that. Okay, so those are the three things that I feel like are helpful to frame the conversation about niching. Now let's move into why it's important for you to have a niche. There are three main reasons why I encourage folks to have a niche, why I encourage encourage is not the right word, why I require my students to choose a niche, and why I encourage others to have a niche. So first and foremost, it makes you more memorable. As I kind of alluded to just now, when there are so many health writers out there, y'all, and as we know, a lot of them do not have any particular healthcare background. That doesn't mean that they don't exist. They're definitely out there. And so when you are in a sea of other people who have a similar goal of creating health content, naturally, the fact that you are a healthcare provider is going to help you stand out from the crowd. However, what will also help you stand out from a writing perspective is if you can say, this is the particular area within writing that I specialize in. People are more likely to remember that. Let's say you're at a conference, right? You're doing a presentation and you're networking, you're chatting afterwards, and somebody asks you about your freelance writing. And let's say they ask you like, hey, Sandy, what kind of freelance content are you writing? Or what kind of health content are you writing? And you say, oh, I write about anything. I write about all kinds of health topics. Okay. let's contrast that with a different hypothetical situation. And let's say that person asks you the same question, but instead of saying, "Oh, I write about anything," what if you were able to say, hey, Daniel, that's a really great question. I actually specialize in writing blog posts and emails for professional associations, right? For health related professional associations. That is much more memorable than somebody that just writes health content for whoever, right? I'm not as likely to remember you if you have a generic, just like a blanket title of health content writer. I'm much more likely to remember you if there's something specific that anchors you in my mind. And so the first thing to remember about a niche is that it makes you more memorable. And that is related to the second reason niching down is so important, is because when you are memorable, then you are consequently more referable. Because let's say Daniel isn't necessarily in a position to need your writing services for a professional association. But let's say his colleague that he works with on the night shift is very active in AMCP or something, right? Or like the American Diabetes Association, and they express a need for having someone to write more blog posts on their website. He's more likely going to think of the Sandy who specializes in blog content and emails for associations than he is to remember the Sandy that's just a general health writer. And so that makes it more easy for Daniel to refer you to his colleague who has that plug with the ADA. So by being more memorable and having that niche that anchors you in someone's mind, you are therefore more referable, which opens you up to more opportunities down the line. And then the third thing is that having a niche makes you more valuable. And I don't mean valuable from like a personal perspective, right? Because we're all valuable, okay? But I mean, it gives you more authority, which makes your services more valuable, which means that you are able to charge based on that true value and based on that expertise, because you're able to demand those rates because you have this specialty area. So the easiest way to explain this part is if you think about generalist roles in healthcare as healthcare providers versus specialized roles for healthcare providers. In most cases, those specialized roles demand higher salaries, higher pay because, right, you have that depth of knowledge and that depth of expertise, which makes those services more high value. So it's kind of similar when it comes to choosing a niche. So the reason that having a niche is important, again, to recap, is number one, and somebody can drop this in the chat if that would be helpful, because I know it would be helpful for folks who are watching. Number one, it makes you more memorable. It therefore, number two, makes you more referable, and it also makes your services more valuable. Are you convinced? Are you convinced now that choosing a niche is really important? The consequences of not choosing a niche, the opposite of all of those things. It's totally within your decision-making power to decide not to choose a niche. I remember when I used to have a podcast that was completely unrelated to anything I do now. It was like a passion project. It was more so for fun. But on that podcast, I got a chance to interview this woman who was a freelance writer, and her brand was the fact that she didn't have a niche, that the fact that she just wrote about all kinds of things. And I just to compare, like, we're talking about freelance health content writing, so at least there's the health category. But when I say that this particular person had no niche, I mean there wasn't even a category. Like, she wasn't a health writer, she was just a writer, period. And she wrote about all kinds of things. And I was so intrigued by her story because, again, as a self-proclaimed multi-passionate person, I felt like I didn't want to limit myself, or to limit the types of subjects or companies or topics that I was able to write about, because I mean, I felt like that I was getting that enough in my full-time roles. Like, those were limiting enough. Why would I go and freelance and create a business that's also going to limit me? And so for the first, I would say 1.5 years of my freelancing, I really just kind of did what I wanted to do. I mean, it was all related to health. All of the companies were health companies. Some were more academic based, others were like health education, others were practices, like private practices and clinics. And for a while, it was cool. The problem that I encountered was that over time, as I wanted to grow, it became much more of a time suck, of an energy suck to have to continuously flip-flop back and forth between different types of projects, different types of clients. Um, I would at some point I was writing a portion of a textbook of like a review textbook for medical students, people who were preparing to take a particular portion of their medical board exams. That was a huge project. It lasted for a really long time. So I was also juggling that project along with a lot of other different projects, which had nothing to do with that. It was like I was also freelancing for a compounding pharmacy. I was also freelancing for a health education website that specialized in like a particular therapeutic area. So I was constantly going back and forth between all of these mindsets because the type of writing I was doing for each of those things was different. And the same thing, the same like aspect of that a variety that made me interested in that in the first place became like the linchpin because I got burned out. I got really tired because on top of my full-time job, on top of being recently married, on top of having a 1-year-old, on top of trying to grow this business and figure it out because I didn't have any specific guidance about what steps to take, I was enjoying the success of going down this path, but it was difficult because I was having to juggle so many different projects and make my brain do so many different things all at the same time. So what I realized was that, oh, these people who keep telling me that I need to have a niche, these people are onto something. These people know what they're talking about because I am tired. This was fun while it lasted, but in order for me to achieve my goal, which was to increase the number of clients that I had and really go from like, oh, freelancing on the side to actually running a full business, I knew that I needed to um, take better charge of my energy. And the way to do that was to say, okay, how can you standardize more of this process so that you're not expending energy trying to flip between different things? And part of that standardization was saying, this is the niche that I'm going to create for myself. I'm going to try to stick to projects that fall into this specific niche. Um, and if there's something that comes that's outside of that, that's just like, Megan, you can't pass that up, then I'll consider it. It doesn't mean that I can't consider other things, but it means that I'm going to try to stay in this lane so that I can preserve my energy and be more effective in the work that I'm doing. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for dropping those. To recap, the niche makes you more memorable. It makes you more referable so that other people can refer you to folks who might need your services, and it makes your writing services more valuable. So thank you so much for dropping that in there. Okay, so where was I? I think at this point we can go into the first steps to choosing your niche. Okay, so in the coaching program, Health Professionals to Health Writers, students use what I call the 4P checklist to actually evaluate their ideas about a niche that they might want to be involved in, and they use that checklist to kind of narrow down a niche. So I'm going to share a few helpful things that you can consider, even if you're not a student of the program, because I think this will be helpful for folks who are trying to work on this on their own and kind of DIY, or for my students who are already enrolled in the January cohort. This will be kind of a preview, a little taste of what we're going to do then. So there are three things that are important. This is all about threes today. There are three things that are going to be important for you to evaluate or to think about as you're coming up with ideas, as you're brainstorming about what you think you might want your niche to be. The first thing, okay, what are you interested in or curious about? What types of areas are you interested in or curious about? Another way to say this could be like, what are you passionate about? So I am not of the camp of people who believe that you have to do it. You can only build a business around something that you are passionate about. I think passion is a piece of it, but passion is not the whole pie. However, starting a freelancing business is not easy, especially if you have, other priorities in your life, which most of us do. We have other jobs, we have families, we have other responsibilities, and so time is limited. And because of that, if you're going to do something on the side, if you're going to try to build a freelancing business, you have to care about what you're doing. You have to care about what you're writing because you're going to put a lot of time and a lot of effort into writing it. So passion or interest or curiosity is not something that you can completely put to the side and say, oh, well, I don't really love this topic, but I'm going to choose it anyway because, it seems trendy or it seems sexy or it seems really profitable. No, you need to have some level of interest or curiosity about the particular niche that you're going to be writing in. So that's first thing to consider. The second factor to consider is your skill or your like set of past experiences. And these can be professional experiences, these can be volunteer experiences, personal experiences, work experience, that type of thing. But think about the different types of encounters you've already had and the different skills that you already have. So this, another way to think about this factor is asking yourself, what are you good at or what have you already done? So, right, that first thing, interests and curiosities, that question would be, what are you interested in or what are you curious about? For skills and experiences, you can ask yourself, what are you good at or what have you already done? And what answering this question is going to do is it's going to help you actively get a sense of what advantages and skills you already have in your knapsack. Okay, so a lot of us, we discount the experiences that we do have. That's something that I see a lot from healthcare providers who are interested in health writing, because we come in thinking that, oh man, I'm just a pharmacist, I'm just a nurse, I'm just a doctor, I've never written before, I don't have any experience. That's not true. You do have experience. You have a wealth of experience on half of what you need to be a successful freelance writer, which is you have the health background, you have the health experience. So I want you to think about those experiences and consider those when you are thinking about what niches might be attractive for you or interesting to you. And then the third thing that's important to look at is the market demand. This is a business. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be going to different companies or entrepreneurs or whoever, and you're going to be saying, hey, these are the services that I offer. Would you like to work with me? If there aren't enough potential companies for you to go to and make that offer, then that means that automatically cuts off your profitability as a freelancer, because that means there are not enough people out there for you to go to and pitch your services and have them offer to pay you and that be valuable for you, right? So you wouldn't want to choose a hyper specific niche that doesn't have enough breadth for you to find prospects who actually want to work with you. So those are kind of three levels of things that you're going to want to consider as you are brainstorming what niches might be available for you. And remember that you're going to be using this niche to market yourself. So it's really important to spend some time here. In health professionals to health writers, the niche phase is phase 2. So it happens really early on. And the reason for that is because it informs everything else that comes after it in the process. It informs the portfolio that you create. Because you're wanting to create a portfolio that supports that niche. It comes before the phase 4, where you're learning how to put put together your packages and price your packages. It comes before phase 5, where you're learning how to go out and pitch clients and pitch prospects and find prospects and convert them into clients. It comes before all of those things because all of those things are really dependent on, in some way, they're either directly or indirectly dependent upon the niche that you chose. So as an action step, right? If you're like, okay, this is cool, but like I need to take some more time to really dive into this, I 100% encourage you to take that time. Like, again, you really want to sit with this for a while, because even though the niche is not permanent, you do want to make sure that you're starting from a strong starting place. So my suggestion is to literally make a chart or a table. In the leftmost column, you can write down those 3 questions. What am I interested in? What am I good at? Or what experience do I already have? And is there market demand? And in the columns to the right, you can kind of fill in what your examples of those things are. And then what you want to do is look and see where there are commonalities. Is there overlap between what you've written for interests, what you've written for experience or skills, what you've written for market demand? And those areas where there are commonalities, like those things show up as answers to multiple questions, that means that those are probably strong starting points for you to choose as a niche. So that's me on my soapbox about choosing a niche. I will preach this up and down every day, all day, because I've been in the position before of not having one, and I know exactly what that is like. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. There are a couple of more seats left in the Health Professionals to Health Writers January cohort. So if you might be interested in joining, you can always just leave a comment that says WRITE, WRITE, or you can always just shoot me a DM and we can talk about it there. But thank you for joining in, and I will see you next time. Have a good one.